The Marine thought he was in control. He humiliated the waitress in front of the entire bar, forcing her to her knees like prey. But he was a fool. He was just the bait, the real target. A traitor who sold out an entire special forces team had just walked in. And the woman at his feet. She wasn't the victim. She was Ghost 7, a hunter. And this was her hunting ground. The performance is over. The hunt begins. A cool, salty breeze drifted in from the Pacific, a familiar caress on the Southern California coastline. It promised a clear, star-filled night for Oceanside, but inside the salty dog, the air was thick and heavy. It was a rough-hewn sanctuary nestled just outside the imposing gates of Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton, smelling perpetually of stale beer, damp oak, and the faint, lingering ghosts of cheap whiskey. The low hum of a classic rock ballad on the jukebox was the bar's steady heartbeat. Behind the bar, Lara Vance moved with a silent, fluid grace that seemed out of place amidst the bar's ruggedness. At 24, she was striking, fair-skinned with sharp, intelligent features. Her dark, nearly black hair was pulled back into a severe, immaculate bun at the nape of her neck, with not a single stray strand escaping. A simple olive-drab t-shirt stretched taut across a frame that was lean but undeniably powerful, the kind of strength built not in a gym, but through relentless functional conditioning. Paired with worn-in blue jeans, she looked like any other young woman working her way through life. But her eyes, a piercing shade of forest green, held a stillness that was unnerving. They missed nothing, cataloging the room with an economy of movement that was both efficient and absolute. To the regulars, she was just the quiet, pretty new girl who never wasted a word. The bell above the door chimed harshly, cutting through the music. Corporal Dillon, Bulldog, Hayes swaggered in, followed by his 3 shadows, all of them reeking of cheap liquor and an unearned sense of superiority. Hayes was a mountain of a man, with a thick neck and shoulders that strained the fabric of his uniform. He carried his bulk with an aggressive swagger meant to intimidate, a transparent overcompensation for some deep-seated insecurity. His followers were younger, leaner, their faces a mixture of bravado and the desperate need for their leader's approval. "Hey, sweetheart!" Hayes's voice boomed across the room, causing a few patrons to glance up before quickly looking away. He slammed a meaty fist on the polished wood of the bar. "4 cold ones, now!" Lara didn't flinch. She simply turned, her expression unreadable, and gave a single, curt nod. Her mind, a place of disciplined calm, went to work. She registered Hayes's puffed-out chest, a classic display of dominance from a man unsure of his own authority. She noted how his 2 flankers instinctively kept their line of sight on the main entrance, a habit of men who always anticipate trouble, or who are the first to run from it. She analyzed them, not with fear, but with the cold, detached precision of a threat assessment. This was a tactical problem, not a personal one. "Look at the little mute," one of his cronies, a private with a weaselly face, snickered to his friend. "Bet she only knows how to nod that pretty head." Hayes's lips twisted into a smirk as Lara returned, placing 4 sweating bottles of beer on the counter with steady hands. He leaned in close, his breath hot and sour. "I don't like silence. It makes me think you're looking down on the United States Marine Corps, little girl." He raised a hand, his intention clear, as if to brush a thumb against her cheek in a gesture that was anything but gentle. From a shadowed corner booth, a pair of wide, terrified eyes watched the scene unfold. Lily, the 10-year-old daughter of the bar's owner, sat frozen. A fortress of crayons and drawing paper surrounded her, her only defense against a world that had stolen her voice 6 months ago, on the night her father was murdered. She was a tiny thing, with a cascade of brown hair and eyes that held a sorrow far too deep for her age. The trauma had locked her words away, leaving her in a silent, lonely world. When Hayes and his men had barged in, her crayon had stopped mid-stroke. She watched them approach Lara, and her small shoulders hunched, a familiar terror creeping in. Lara was her anchor. The quiet waitress never pushed her to speak, never looked at her with pity. She communicated in silent nods and the occasional warm glass of milk left beside Lily's artwork. She was a shield. Lara felt the weight of Lily's stare. As Hayes postured for his men, his attention momentarily diverted, Lara's gaze flickered to the corner booth. She met Lily's eyes and gave the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. It was a coded message, a promise forged in their silent friendship. You are safe. I am here. The reassurance, however, only fueled Hayes's frustration. Her composure was a challenge he couldn't comprehend. He picked up his beer, took a long swallow, and then, with deliberate casualness, let the bottle tip. Amber liquid gushed onto the floorboards, pooling right at Lara's feet. Oops. Clumsy me, he said, his voice dripping with mock apology. He then kicked the bottle aside. Clean it up, pretty thing. Get on your knees and make it spotless. He threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that his men eagerly echoed, filling the quiet bar with the thunder of their contempt. Lara released a slow, measured breath, the kind she'd practiced in the biting Kandahar winds to steady a rifle scope. The air in her lungs felt cold, cleansing the flash of heat from Hayes's insult. She knelt, her movements economical and precise, reaching for a cleaning rag tucked beneath the bar. Every patron's eyes were on her, a heavy, suffocating blanket of silent judgment. Hayes planted his scuffed combat boot inches from the puddle, a wordless threat. Make it shine, he growled, the bass in his voice vibrating through the floorboards. As she reached for the spill, his boot came down hard on her outstretched fingers. A sharp, grinding pain shot up her arm, not enough to break bone, but more than enough to humiliate. It was a petty act of cruelty, the mark of a weak man desperate to feel strong, but the reaction he expected, a cry of pain, a flinch of fear, never came. Instead, a wave of pure, distilled fury, honed over years of combat and loss, surged through Lara. She kept it leashed, a predator held in check behind a cage of iron will. She lifted her head, and for the first time, Hayes saw past the quiet waitress. Her green eyes were no longer passive. They were vacant, a chillingly calm void that promised nothing but violence. The hunter had just seen the trap. You got a problem? He barked, unnerved by her sudden defiant stillness. He grabbed her arm, yanking her roughly to her feet. Let me teach you some respect. The cheap cotton of her t-shirt couldn't withstand the force. With a sharp tearing sound, the fabric at her back ripped open. In the struggle, the olive-drab material had ridden up, revealing a sliver of intricate black ink high on her shoulder blade. Hayes, driven by a brutish curiosity, hooked his fingers into the tear and ripped it further down. Let's see what trashy little secret you're hiding, he sneered. A butterfly? A rose? His words died in his throat. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. The jukebox seemed to fall silent. Sprawled across the toned, scarred landscape of Lara's back was not a delicate flower, but a masterpiece of military heraldry, a magnificent eagle, wings outstretched, clutched a globe in its talons above a fouled anchor. The sacred eagle, globe, and anchor of the United States Marine Corps. Beneath it, etched with brutal clarity, was the skull and dagger of Force Reconnaissance, and below that, in stark block letters that seemed to burn into the very air of the bar, were three simple identifiers. Ghost 7, Kandahar, 2019. From a dark corner, an old man who had sat silently nursing a whiskey stood up slowly. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, his posture still ramrod straight from a lifetime of service. My God, he whispered, his voice cracking with a mixture of awe and terror. It's the Reaper of Kandahar. Just then, as if summoned by the shift in destiny, the bell on the door jingled again. A man named Cade Thorne stepped inside, bringing the scent of expensive, cologne and ambition with him. He was in his mid-40s, handsome in a predatory way, with silvering temples and a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. As a powerful defense contractor, he radiated an aura of untouchable influence. He scanned the room, his eyes brushing past the frozen drama at the bar, clearly looking for someone. His gaze settled on the corner booth. Lily saw him. The color drained from her face. Her crayons clattered to the floor. The man's polished smile was a nightmare made real. The same cold, empty smile she'd seen from the back seat of her father's car that night, illuminated for a horrifying second before the world had dissolved into chaos. A silent scream trapped in her throat, she scrambled from the bench and dove under the table, her small body shaking uncontrollably. Lara saw it all. She saw Thorne's arrival. She saw Lily's visceral terror. The final critical piece of the puzzle slid into place. Hayes and his drunken theatrics were just the opening act, the carefully orchestrated distraction to keep the target complacent until he walked willingly into the cage. The prey had arrived. The air in the bar crackled, the silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. Hayes's face, which had been flushed with drunken arrogance, was now a mask of cold professionalism. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. He lowered his hands, his eyes no longer on Lara, but locked on Cade Thorne. He subtly touched his collar, his voice a low, clear whisper into a hidden mic. Tango is in the nest. I repeat, Tango is in the nest. He and his men were not bullies. They were a military police escort team, and their performance had been flawless. Cade Thorne, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, felt a prickle of alarm. His instincts, honed by years of navigating treacherous backroom deals, screamed at him. He turned abruptly for the exit, but his path was blocked by a solid, immovable object. Silas, the bar's owner and Lily's father, stood before the door. He was a man in his late 50s, built like a bulldog with a bald head and a neatly trimmed gray beard. As a retired Marine Master Sergeant, he possessed an aura of quiet, unshakable authority. With a deliberate final click, he turned the deadbolt. The sound echoed like a cell door slamming shut. Around the room, the other patrons rose as one, the old veteran who had identified Lara, a former Navy intelligence officer, the burly man who looked like a fisherman, an FBI agent, the trucker nursing a coffee at the counter, a federal marshal. They moved with the synchronized, deadly grace of a well-drilled unit. This was not a bar, it was a kill box, and Cade Thorne was the target. "Welcome to the Salty Dog, Cade," Lara said. Her voice was unrecognizable. The timid whisper was gone, replaced by a tone as hard and cold as forged steel, carrying the natural command of an NCO who had led men into hell. She stepped towards him, the torn shirt revealing the scars that crisscrossed the masterpiece on her back. "Or should I call you the man who sold the coordinates of SEAL Team 3 to a terrorist cell in exchange for a weapons contract?" Thorne's blood ran cold. His mask of sophisticated charm shattered, revealing the panicked animal beneath. Who are you?" he stammered, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. "I'm the consequence," Lara replied, her green eyes boring into him. "I'm the ghost of the men you got killed. I'm Ghost 7. She continued her slow, deliberate advance, each step a hammer blow against his crumbling composure. "You made a mistake, Cade. 6 months ago, you met an investigative reporter named Frank Miller down at the docks. You thought he was a fool, so you fed him disinformation. But he wasn't a fool. He was smart, and he photographed you handing a drive to a foreign agent." She stopped, glancing towards the table where Lily was hidden. "So you killed him." Her gaze snapped back to Thorne. "But you didn't know his 10-year-old daughter was asleep in the back of his car. She saw everything. She saw your face. She's the only reason this case didn't go cold." Lara's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "And for the past 6 months, my mission hasn't just been to hunt you, it's been to protect her." The full, horrifying scope of the trap finally dawned on Thorne. The waitress, the child, the bar, it was all an elaborate stage. He realized with sickening certainty that his powerful connections, his offshore accounts, his army of lawyers, none of it could reach him here. He was utterly and completely alone, caught in a cage designed by ghosts. Panic ignited in Thorne's eyes. Cornered and desperate, he made one last feral move. He lunged not towards the armed agents, but towards the table where Lily was hiding, his mind seizing on the only potential leverage he had left. "Stay back!" he roared, a wild gambit to snatch a human shield. He had fatally underestimated the Reaper of Kandahar. Lara moved like lightning. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. She didn't draw a weapon. She was the weapon. Closing the distance in 2 explosive steps, she slammed the heel of her hand into the side of his knee. The joint buckled with a sickening pop, and Thorne screamed as his leg gave way. Before he could fall, she spun behind him, snaking an arm under his and applying a devastatingly efficient armbar that torqued his shoulder to the breaking point. A final, precise elbow strike to his temple silenced his scream, and he collapsed to the floor, an inert heap of expensive tailoring. The entire takedown lasted less than 3 seconds. The dead-bolted door burst open. A tactical team of FBI agents in full gear swarmed in, securing the room. At their lead was a tall, imposing man in the decorated uniform of a Marine Corps general. His silver hair cropped short and his jaw set like granite. This was General Marcus Vance, Lara's uncle and the architect of the entire operation. He took in the scene, his niece standing calm and resolute, Thorne unconscious at her feet. A look of immense pride softened his stern features. "Mission accomplished, Sergeant," he said, his voice resonating with authority. As Thorne was cuffed and hauled away, a fragile sound broke the tense silence. "Lara!" Every head turned. Lily had emerged from under the table. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in 6 months, her lips had formed a word. Her voice was a tiny, hesitant whisper, but it was a voice nonetheless. Silas rushed to his daughter, scooping her into his arms, his own tears of relief and joy flowing freely. The subsequent months saw Cade Thorne's empire of deceit dismantled. The trial was swift and decisive. Cade Thorne, convicted of treason, espionage, and first-degree murder. With Lily's courageous testimony and the mountain of evidence Lara's team had gathered, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole at ADX Florence, the federal supermax prison. Thorne's accomplices. 3 high-ranking Pentagon officials and 2 fellow contractors were court-martialed and received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years in military prison, stripped of all rank and honor. The foreign agent, captured in a coordinated CIA operation in Geneva, he was extradited to the U.S. to face justice. Lara stood in General Vance's office at the Pentagon, looking out at the Washington Monument. "Thorne's entire network is gone, Lara, because of you," her uncle said. "The Joint Chiefs have authorized the creation of a new unit, Task Force 7. It will be dedicated to hunting internal threats, traitors like Thorne. They need a commander, someone incorruptible, fearless, who understands the price of betrayal. They need a ghost who can step into the light." He placed a file on his desk. "This isn't an order, it's a choice." Lara thought of Lily, now laughing and talking again. She thought of the quiet sanctuary of the salty dog and the good men who had stood with her. She had found justice for her fallen brothers and returned a voice to an innocent child. She picked up the file. "I accept the command, General." Sergeant Alara Vance, Ghost 7, was gone. In her place stood Captain Vance, commander of Task Force 7. Her war was not over, but now she would no longer fight it from the shadows. She was a guardian, a symbol of justice, a living reminder that even in the darkest corners, honor endures. In a world that often feels lost in shadows, it is easy to forget that heroes walk among us, hidden in plain sight. We often search for God's miracles in the parting of seas or the turning of water to wine, but perhaps the truest miracles are found in the strength and courage of ordinary people. They are the angels sent to stand watch, the quiet guardians placed in our path when we need them most, the stranger who shows kindness, the friend who offers protection, the voice that rises to defend the innocent. You do not need to be a soldier like Lara to be a force for good. In our daily lives, every time we choose compassion over cruelty, courage over complacency, we perform a small miracle. Defending someone from a harsh word, offering help to a neighbor in need, or protecting the vulnerable. These are the acts of quiet heroism that illuminate the world. This is how we answer God's call to be a light in the darkness. If this story of justice and protection touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that courage is still alive in the world. Tell us in the comments below about an everyday hero you have known. And be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories that affirm the strength of the human spirit. May God bless you and all those you hold dear.